Let me just give a brief about myself. My name is Rajesh, and I've got 11 plus years of IT experience. I started as a Java programmer, worked on multiple technologies and multiple domains, and from the last 4 to 5 years, I've been working on the BA industry, especially in the Oracle Business Intelligence space. So I've been conducting this online training from the last 2 to 3 years. And now coming to the OBA 11G trainings, yeah, conducted several batches, around 60 batches I've conducted. So this is about it. I need around 30 hours of to complete this OBA 11G session. And the prerequisites for this is like a person should have a knowledge of data warehousing concepts and SQL. Anyway, I'm going to provide these prerequisites. That shouldn't be a problem. So to start with, as I was telling you, this particular module will have the prerequisites for learning OBA is you need to have a basic SQL wherein you'll be using certain TTL commands or DML commands or DCL, whatever basic SQL is required. We'll be teaching that to the students. Followed by we'll also cover the data warehousing concepts. What we understand, what we think is a student normally, before he could start querying or before he could start using the OBA reporting tool, he should have a very fair understanding of what is a data warehouse, because at the end of the day he's going to use the data warehouse for generating the reports. Now when we talk about data warehouse, we should understand what is data warehouse, what is the process involved in the process of data warehousing, what is the source, what are the transformations, what are the targets. So as part of this particular session, we are going to introduce what is data warehouse to the students. They will understand the definition. We'll talk about the 4 pillars of the data warehouse, and then slowly we'll introduce them, what is the process which is involved in the data warehouse. So how a data warehouse is being implemented. We start with the sources. We'll talk about different kinds of heterogeneous sources which can be used to create a data warehouse. We'll take industry scenarios, take an example of Walmart or any other supermarket or a bank or an insurance company, so which might have multiple data sources. So we'll take these as this is one of the example wherein we'll introduce the sources, which could be different kinds of databases or different kinds of applications, and these application data is stored in different kinds of databases. So they act as sources for your data warehouse. And from this, how you're going to move the data to the warehouse. So we'll define them, what are the sources and how you transform, how you extract the data from the sources, transform the data and move it to the target. So we have a separate module, we have a separate slide. I'm going to show you. So probably in this particular in this particular presentation, we will cover most of the stuff, what are operation systems, when we talk about operation systems, again, we're talking about the sources. All your operational sources, what are the features of these sources, what is goal of information processing, what are the characteristic features of operational systems, what is the difference between tactical and strategic, what is the difference between OLTP and data warehouse, all these sort of. To start with, we'll start with the operational systems, and then we'll slowly get into the sources. When we talk about the sources, we are talking about the operational sources, how we are going to extract the data from these sources, and what are the transformations involved in this, and how we move them to the data warehouse. So typically we are trying to show the architecture of a data warehouse, what are the components which are involved in this architecture. So to get a fair and understanding of a data warehouse, we'll discuss the data warehouse architecture. And as part of this, we introduce the ETL concepts, what are the different ETL tools available in the market, how the data is extracted, how the data is transformed, what are the different kinds of transformation methodologies are there, what are the different ways the data can be loaded to a data warehouse. So we talk about the full load, incremental load, all these stuff as part of this. And then we'll also discuss about implementation, data warehousing, different approaches to implement a data warehouse. Probably we'll talk about the top-down or the bottom-up approach. So we'll discuss about the advantages and disadvantages of each of these approaches. And also we'll talk about the staging area, which is part of your data warehouse. And we'll talk about the metadata. So when you talk about metadata, we have metadata at every layer. You talk about the source, you have metadata there. You have a metadata at a stage. You have a metadata at a data warehouse layer. You have a metadata at a semantic layer, at a reporting layer. So metadata is the core thing, when we talk about, the reporting solution. So we'll talk about different kinds of metadata which is being involved. So ultimately, at the end of the day, we actually play with the metadata, right? So we will try to discuss, all these different types of metadata, and then we'll talk about the repository. What does it include? And we'll talk about different types of data marts. Now, as a part of data warehouse, like we discussed data marts, and there are different kinds of data marts. Like you have feeder data marts, satellite data marts, dependent data marts. So we discuss all these things. Then slowly, we'll also, as part of this, we'll try to see what are operational systems like OLTP systems, and then what are OLAP systems, the data warehouse systems. What are the differences? We'll discuss what are the differences between these two. What is the need of a data warehouse? How data warehouse has been introduced? Like, we'll discuss what are the disadvantages, what are the problems, the end users are facing because of the OLTP systems. So because of these problems, we are going to introduce the data warehouse. So we'll be discussing all these aspects. And then slowly we'll introduce the operational data stores, ODS. This ODS will discuss about the differences between your ODS and the warehouse, like how they are different with each other. And slowly we'll introduce the BI tools, like how BI tools can be used on top of your data warehouse to generate the reports. And we will also introduce the different types of dimension modeling techniques like star schema, and we'll talk about the different types of tables, conform dimension table, or junk dimensions, or degenerate dimensions, factless fact tables. All these things which are part of your data warehouse will be discussed. And then finally, to end with this, like we'll talk about the slowly changing dimensions, which are core thing in your data warehouse, wherein the students will be taught about how SCDs can be implemented in your data warehouse. What are the different types of slowly changing dimensions which are there? So these are the topics which are going to cover as part of your data warehousing. Typically, if you look at this particular presentation, it is around 100 plus slides are there, which includes A to Z. So by the end of this particular session, so the student will have a very fair understanding of what is a data warehouse and what is the process involved in the warehouse, what are the components involved in the warehouse. So it's like A to Z of data warehouse. Like by the end of the session, I can ensure that he will be having a very fair understanding of a data warehouse, the process of data warehouse, the architectural components of a data warehouse. So moving ahead, so by the end of the session, we are sure that the students are having a fair understanding of the SQL which is required, and also with the data warehouse. Once the prerequisites are being taught to the students, we will start with the OBI installation and configuration. So as part of the course, we are covering the installation also. And we also configure the OBI systems on the client machine, on the customer's machine, or on the student's machines. So as part of this, what we recommend is like a 8 GB RAM machine with the Core i3 processor is what we require for installing the OBI. Though, if you look at OBI documentation and all, they say 4 GB is enough, but normally we suggest to have a 8 GB RAM machine. That is what a comfortable machine I can say. So currently I'm using a OBI 8 GB RAM machine, so this is pretty much comfortable. If you see, I'm able to access reports and all. So what I say is this is pretty much the same. I need to start the services. Okay, so going ahead, let me just start with services. Okay, so as part of this installation, what we are going to cover is first we'll be installing the Oracle database, Oracle 11g database. So I'll be providing the links which are required to install the OBI. So we'll be providing the links of the Oracle 11g database. To start with, we'll be installing the JDK, and then so it will be JDK, first installation of the JDK, and you set the environment properties of JDK, and then you install the database, which is Oracle 11g, and then followed by we create RCU, like we run the RCU to create two schemas, which are dev_MDS and dev_BA schema. So basically these two schemas will store the OBI metadata. So for that we'll run the RCU utility to create these two schemas. So once we create these two schemas, we'll start working on the OBA installation. So we have got around 4 disks for OBA. So you need to download these 4 OBA disks. We'll be installing and configuring this OBA. So once you install and configure this OBA, we need to test the sample reports which are part of this. And once we test the RPD and the sample reports, then we can actually configure a different BA sample schemas or supplier schema. So as part of the course, I'll be providing 2 different schemas for which we'll be practicing. One is the BA sample schema. The other one is the supplier schema. So I'll be showing how to configure these 2 schemas as part of your OBA system.
So here's your question.
Yeah, tell me something.
So you said you're going to give a link to the Oracle database, right?
Right.
So you were expecting Candid to install that?
So I'll be showing everything from A to Z. I can show all these things. So let me just share you. So what I would expect the candidate is they should be downloading all the relevant softwares. Now if you see, these are 32-bit download links and that is 64-bit downloads. What I would expect is the candidate to download all these softwares and keep it ready so that in one of our sessions we'll start installing it one of our students' machine. Okay, so that everybody can start following whatever we are going to do. So that way we are trying to install the relevant softwares on the student's machine, and simultaneously all the students should be able to do the same thing.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So you're going to install database along with all the OBIE disks, right?
Correct. Right. Only thing what I would expect from the students is they should be ready with all these stuff so that we don't have to waste downloading these. So all these downloads, if they kept in place, then we can start doing the installation process. So yeah, we are including this as part of the course. So as part of the course, like by the end of this session, all the students should have the OBA installed and configured on their machines, so that in the next topics, whenever we start working on the OBA, they should be able to practice whatever I'm going to teach them.
Sure.
So that is the understanding. So moving ahead, let me just start my services. Okay. So once we have installed the OB11G, on the student's machine, they should be in a position to do exercises on their installations. So we'll start with the introduction to Oracle Business Intelligence, where we introduce the BA concepts. What are the different BA tools in the market? Like we introduce tools like we have Cognos and MicroStrategy. What are the differences? How OBA is different from these tools? What is the history of OBA? You all know, right? The Oracle never developed this product. It was a product of some other company. So it all started way back. There is a company called Enquire System which has created this analytical product, and then slowly that particular company got acquired by a company called Siebel Analytics. So Siebel Analytics was selling this software for quite some time. And it has named this product as Siebel Analytics. Probably, in the previous versions it was called Siebel Analytics. And then slowly Oracle acquired Siebel Corporation. Then it acquired this product, and then it renamed this product from Siebel Analytics to Oracle Business Intelligence Enterprise Edition. So that's a short discussion about the history of OBA. So this also students should be aware of what is OBA and the history. That's what I feel. And then going ahead, we are going to discuss about the OBA major topics, like what are we going to learn over here. See, as part of your job, as part of your OBA developer job, it involves two different aspects. One is the repository design and development. So one is the repository design and development. So the way it works is, you take any BA project. I'm just giving a brief about how it actually works in the industry. So BA project is initiated, and generally what will happen is, if the data warehouse is in place, so if a data warehouse is in place, that will act as a source for your reporting aspect. In case if your data warehouse is not in place, like they are just starting their IT BA project, wherein they wanted to create a data warehouse and they wanted to generate reports out of that. So the way it starts is, it starts with the requirement gathering of the relevant KPIs. It starts with the requirement gathering of the relevant KPIs. So they will understand what exactly are they looking at, what kind of strategic information are they looking at. Once they identify all these things, let's assume that the data warehouse is already in place, and your developer will go, and again it depends on who will go for the requirement gathering. Probably a developer or the project manager or a business analyst will go and gather the requirement gathering. So he talks with the client, understand, let's say suppose he has understood that there are 30 reports needs to be developed in OBI. There are 30 reports to be developed in OBI. So how, let's see how it works. Now in order to create these 30 reports, first of all, he has to understand the structure. He has to understand the structure of the data warehouse. That is the first and foremost thing, because he is totally new to the environment. Let's say suppose Sandeep is deploying one of his employees to one of the OBA projects. The way it works is, since they are new to the structure, they are new to the environment, the employees have to understand the structure of the data warehouse, right? So only when you understand the structure of the data warehouse, you will be able to understand what kind of reports can be generated. So for this, probably he might have a discussion with their technical team, understand the tables and the columns. So we are talking about the physical tables and the columns which are part of the database. So for developing these 30 reports, he will have to come up with, for each report he has to come up with the tables and the columns, physical tables and the columns required for developing these 30 reports, right? So for like that, he has to come up, for all the 30 reports, he will create a mapping document. Which will have, you have requirement 1, report 1. These are the functional columns. Let's say the business user gave, let's say 10 columns in report 1. In report 1, he wants 10 functional columns. Let's say call 1, call 2, column 3. Like that, you will identify, and these are your functional requirements. So you will have to map it with your physical table. So you will have a physical table, and you will have a column. So you will come up with a mapping document which will have the corresponding, this is your functional description of the column, and over here you will identify which table 1. So you will say table 1 and column 1. So that way the developer has to come up with a mapping document which will have every report and corresponding physical tables and columns. So once he comes up with this particular mapping document which has 30 report relevant tables and columns, he will have a clear picture about what has to be done, what are the physical tables which are there. Then slowly he should be in a position to import these reports. He should be in a position to import these tables into his OBA layer. So that is what the understanding is, to come up with this document, right? So what the next approach will be, he has to create a repository. So our course is designed in such a way that it involves two things. One is a repository design. The other requirement, you will come up with the tables and columns. You will import all these tables and columns into your RPD. So you are going to create your RPD using this 30 tables and columns. Whatever tables and columns you have identified, you will be importing all these tables and columns into your repository, into your RPD. So that's how you start creating the repository. And you need to design this repository. So let me just open a RPD file for you so that you'll have a clear understanding. So it's like your course is majorly divided into two areas. One is repository design and development, and the other one is reports development. So if you see, this is a typical BI sample RPD I have created. So this is, there are three major three layers are there. We have got a physical layer, a BMM layer, and a presentation layer. So the student, like the employee or the developer, has to import all the relevant tables and columns to this. Okay, once he imports all the relevant tables and columns in this layer, he'll have to design these. He'll have to provide the physical joins. He'll have to provide respective keys and other stuff. So this will be discussed as part of the physical layer. So he has to design this physical layer, then followed by he has to design with the business model layer. He has to do the dimensional modeling as part of this. So you'll have to come up with creation of star schemas as part of this, and then followed by he has to create a presentation layer. So your repository development includes design and development of a physical layer, design and development of a BMM layer, and you design and develop your presentation layer. So all these are part of your repository design and development. So that is what we are going to cover as part of your course. So repository design and development is one of the major area which will take around 60% of your time, 60-65%, and rest of the 30% you will be catering to answers and dashboards. So this is how the course is structured. Right, so we'll just give an intro of what is repository design and development and the intro of answers and dashboard to start with. And once the end of this course, the student will have a fair idea about how it works in the real-time industry, how the report is, how the BI project is run. So we'll give the intro of how a BI project is run, and then followed by the architecture. We'll discuss about the 11G, OBI 11G architecture, what are the components involved in this, what are the client tools. Now, just now I have showed you one of the client tools, which is my administration tool. So this is one of the client which we use for creating a repository. This is one of the client. This is the client what we use for creating the repository. So I'm just entering the credentials. So this is a place, probably if I wanted to create a new repository, I can go ahead and create a new repository and I can import relevant tables. So all these things can be done using these clients. So I've got different types of clients. One is a client which is used to create my repository, and there is a separate web-based interface, a web-based client to create reports and dashboards. So we use a web-based interface. So this is your web-based interface which you use for creating your reports. And then moving ahead, we'll be discussing all the relevant components which are part of your 11G architecture. Like you have got OBA server, which is the main core part of your OBA architecture, which will take care of query generation, taking the request from the clients, and generate the query, and it converts your normal logical query into physical query, and this physical query will be sent to the database. So all these things will be done by your server, OBS server, and we will talk about the repository file, which is the actual metadata layer. So this is what you have seen. This is your RPD file. In your RPD file, all you have is the metadata. So you store all the metadata. You don't store actual data. You just create, you import the relevant tables and columns. If you see over here, all these are nothing but your metadata of your underlying database. So we play with metadata in these layers. So that is what we are going to learn about RPD, how it is created, how it is deployed. And then we'll talk about other components like answers, interactive dashboards. So we're just going to give an intro about all these components. Anyway, we're going to deal with these components in detail in the later parts. So then we'll start with the OBA repository design and development. So as part of this, we start with the repository basics, wherein we discuss about sample request processing, how a request is being processed. So when you talk about request processing, the way it works is whenever you create a report using your web-based interface, using a web-based interface, what happens in the background? So when a request is being, let's say you have a report 1 and let's say you have a yearly sales report. I'll just take a simple report, yearly sales report, wherein you're taking the columns as year and say sales so let's say product as well. So you're providing the year, sales, and product. These are the three columns which are trying to fetch, create a report using these three columns. So what will happen in the background? So when you create a report and run this report goes to a component called as presentation server. A presentation server. So there are a number of components which we might have already discussed as part of your architectural component. So one of the component is presentation server, which receives the request from the end user, who's nothing but the web browser. So from the web browser, whenever a report is run by the end user, the request goes to your presentation server. So it receives a request and then it will pass on this request to OBI server. So OBI server will look into this request. It will look into the request. So what it will do is, it will actually talk to the RPD. So OBI server talk to the RPD. So OBI server talk to the RPD. So this is the flow actually. Your web browser makes a request, it goes to the presentation server, presentation server passes the request to OBI server will look into the RPD. So it looks into the RPD like this. So it looks into the RPD, it will look into the columns what we are asking. We are asking for year column. Okay, year column is there in the D1 timetable. And it will look into the fact tables for the corresponding sales column. And then it will look into the product table for the product column. So it generates a presentation query. It generates a presentation query out of this, and then it will look into the corresponding logical request. So it's going to convert your presentation query. It's going to convert your presentation query into a logical query. So what do you mean by logical query? A logical query involves different facts and dimensions. So if you see, in my second layer, we are talking about facts, and this particular layer will have all your facts and dimensions. I'll just show you how it looks like. So all these are, this is your fact joined by different dimensions. So based out of this joins and all, it is going to create a logical query. So once it creates a logical query based on the joins, based on the tables, it will convert this logical query into physical query. Because your logical layer is tied up with your physical layer. Your logical layer in your RPD is tied up with your physical layer. If you see all your physical layer, this is your logical layer. VMM layer is your logical layer. This is tied up with your physical layer. So you are converting your logical layer into physical layer using your physical layer components. And then once you generate this physical query, you're going to send it to the DB. Or the underlying data source, whichever data source what we are using, we are going to query the database and then fetch the results. So database, once you query the database will provide the result of the query. So again, the OBS server receives this request. So again, the query results are being passed to OBS server, and then OBS server passes it to presentation service. Now, what is the role of a presentation server? It presents the data to the end user in such a format that end user can easily understand. So, probably if you are trying to use this, if you wanted to view this report in a pie chart format, so all these things will be done by your presentation server. So, it is going to send the results in a presentable format, to the end user. So it could be a normal pie chart, it could be a pivot table, it could be a normal table. So all these presentable formats are done by your presentation server, and the results are sent to the end user. So finally, end user on his browser, he will be able to see the result either in the form of a pie chart or in the form of a table or in the form of whatever form he wants. So that's how a back-end processing works. So this is the sample request processing which we'll be discussing with the end user. So once, after this particular topic, you will have a very fair understanding of how OBS server works, how a request is being processed. This is the main core important thing which he has to understand. And then we'll talk about how to use an administration tool. We'll talk about what is a repository directory where all your repositories are being stored. and we talk about how we open a repository. And when you talk about RPD, there are two different ways of opening RPD. If you see over here, I have opened my RPD in an online mode. There is an online mode, nothing but the server copy. So whatever changes I do, it gets reflected in my end. The end user can see the changes. So let me see if my server is. Okay, this is how a interface looks like, Now, if I have to create a report, I'll just have to click analysis, and then select the BA sample subject area. Now, if you see, this is how my end user will see whatever I create as part of my repository. So to start with, I import my physical tables over here, and then I do the dimension modeling, and then I create a presentation layer. So whatever I do over here will be reflected as part of your subject details. So at the end of the day, my output from my RPD is this particular layer, the presentation layer, through which my end user will be able to create reports, or the developer will be using this to create a report. Now I'm just creating a simple report wherein I'm taking year column, let's say cal year, and then I'm double clicking this, and I'm selecting a sales, just to show you how to create a simple report. So I have created a small simple report. So when I run this report, it is giving me this result, and I can view this result in different formats, like I say pie chart. So I'm creating a pie chart. So when I'm running a particular report, how the request is being processed, we have discussed, right? So this particular whatever columns you are sending it to the presentation layer. So these are the two columns. This goes and this gets converted into a presentation request, and presentation request gets converted into logical request. Logical request gets converted into physical request, and physical query goes to the database. Database will send the results, and the result will be sent to the BA server. BA server will send the results back to the presentation server. Presentation server will send it to the end user in this form. So this is how it works. So we are seeing this flow, right? Probably we'll discuss in detail how it works as part of our course. And we'll discuss about the different kinds of initialization files. We have got, your OBS server depends on certain initialization files. Whenever you start your OBS server looks into certain initialization files like NQS config. This is a configuration file. It looks wherein the configuration file will have the RPD details, the caching details. There are so many details will be there. So basically, the server gets configured based on this particular file. So we'll discuss the different kinds of configuration files, and we'll talk about how to create a repository, how we going to connect, create a connection pool. So when you talk about connection pool, so you might have seen my administration tool. In order for me to import my tables, I'll have to create a connection pool. Let me just show you how to create this. I'm just trying to create a new repository. I can give any name for this repository. I just give new repository, and then say I'm giving the credentials for my repository. So every repository will have a credential so that it is secure. WebLogic 123, WebLogic 123. I'm just trying to show you how to create a sample repository. Now I have clicked the next, and it is asking me to select a driver, and I'm trying to connect to my underlying data source, which is Oracle, and I'm trying to connect to a schema called SH, which comes with the Oracle product. So I'm connecting to that, and I'm trying to import tables, foreign keys, and keys. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to connect to my SH schema, and I'm trying to import the respective tables which are required for creating a report. So I wanted, let's say, sales table amount. I want. So if you observe, it has created a connection pool object. When I click next, if you observe, when I say next, it's going to create a connection pool object. This is a connection pool object. So I'll show you how it works. Then let's say I'm selecting a channels column. This is how you import the columns from your database to your OBA layer. I'm trying to import the tables from your physical layer, that is your database layer, to your OBA layer. So I have selected these columns and I am saying finish. So if you see here, I have created a connection pool and I have imported these tables to my OBA layer. This is how you import the layer, and this is your connection pool. So connection pool contains all the relevant details for you to import the respective tables into your physical layer of your OBA. So we'll discuss about the connection pool, and then we'll discuss about different modes of opening the repository. As I was telling you, your RPD can be opened in an online mode or an offline mode. Now if you see, this is opened in an offline mode. This is not online mode. Online mode means it's a server copy. So whatever changes you do over here, it gets reflected in your server. I'll try to open another instance and open it in an online mode. If I open it in online mode, so this is the online mode. This is the server copy. So if I'm going to change anything over here, say FN revenue, okay, FN revenue, I'm going to change this. I can change this using over here. I can say revenue. I'm trying to rename this particular particular table name, revenue. I'm making it as revenue. Okay. So whatever changes I do, save it. This gets reflected in my. If you open your web over here, it is FN revenue. So I did a change to my FN revenue name. So I'm going to see that change. I'll say reload server metadata. If you observe, the change got reflected. The change got reflected. So server copy, when you open an RPD in an online mode, whatever changes you do over here, that gets reflected on your subject areas. So this is what we are going to discuss, repository in online and offline mode, and we'll slowly discuss about different layers, physical layer, BMM layer. BMM layer stands for business model and mapping layer. Then we'll discuss about how to create a presentation. See, all these are just intros. We are just giving the intros of different layers. And then followed by, we'll talk about how to build a physical layer. Now we are talking about how to create a physical layer. That's what I was trying to show you. I was showing you how to create a physical layer. Once you import these tables, you'll have to provide joins between these tables. So you'll have to provide the joins. These are the joins. If you double click this, you'll see that there's a physical foreign key join between these two tables, the times and the sales table. So we'll have to create the joins in case if the joins are not available. So once you create the joins, you will have to create a BMM layer. So there is a process how you create. You can create. There are different ways of create a business model. So one of the simplest ways is you can drag and drop. You can drag and drop, and then you are done with your repository. So your repository is consistent. You validate your repository. So you're done with your repository. So this is one of the simplest way of creating a repository, wherein you create a physical layer, import your tables into a physical layer, and then you create a business model and mapping layer. So automatically when you drag and drop this physical object onto this layer, it gets created, the business model gets created, and then you can see that it also creates the relevant joins. I'm going to open the business model diagram. You see, it has created a join between the sales and the respective dimension tables. And similarly, have created a presentation object also. So this is your subject area. So this is very simple tool. You can, but only thing is what the end user has to learn. The student has to learn the business model and mapping layer. This is the most complex part where he has to learn most of the stuff over here, the second layer. Physical layer is very simple. Actually, you need to import the tables and provide joins. But in BMM layer is where you'll have to learn most of the tricks of the trade. Like, you need to know how to create dimension models, how to create star schemas, how do you set the, how do you create dimension hierarchies. All these things you'll be doing it as part of your BMM layer. So as part of your physical layer development, you will learn how to create a ODBC connection, how do you set a connection pool properties, how do you import the tables, how do you validate your import, how do you create your physical keys and joins, creating aliases. All these things will be discussed as part of your physical layer, which I just shown you. And then you learn about BMM layer, how do you create a business model. You're talking about the actual business model. So this is a place where actually you write all your business logic, right? In case like you might have a requirement to create 30 reports, and in these 30 reports, probably let's take a report one, 8 columns are there and 2 columns are not there as part of your physical table. So you need to create those 2 columns. So you need to create those 2 columns, which we call as derived columns. So using the existing physical columns, you might have to create 2 new columns. So those 2 new columns you'll be creating as part of your sales. For example, if it is there, I wanted to have a commission column. So what I do, I'll have to go here, select a logical column. Okay, I'll say commission, and then over here I'll have to provide a formula for this, my column source. So I'll have to create a column, provide a formula to this using the existing table. So I have my existing table, amount sold is there, I'll say amount sold into 10 by 100. So this will be my commission column. So I'm just giving an example of how to create a derived column. Probably this column is not available as part of your physical table, and you need to create this for a reporting purpose. So you have created one new column, one new derived column. This is one of the ways you create derived columns. Like that, there will be a number of requirements, a number of columns which are not present in your physical layer, which are not part of your database layer. You might have to create as part of your BMM layer. So all these things will be done as part of your this logical layer. Right. Once you have done all these things, then you drag and drop it in the presentation layer. This is the layer you provide all the cosmetic setup. How the end user would like to see the columns. End user might not like the calendar underscore. Underscores doesn't make any sense for a business user. So you'll have to remove all these. There might be a number of columns which the end user might not require. So you'll have to remove all the unnecessary columns. Class ID might not make any difference for it. So all these unique keys or primary keys which are there, you'll have to remove as part of a presentation layer. So presentation layer is nothing but a layer which the end user will see. So end user will see the presentation layer on his web-based interface. On his web-based interface, he'll see the subject area, which is the presentation layer of your this thing. So if you look at our server copy, so you can see that this is the layer. So you will develop this subject area in such a way that it is meaningful to the end user, to the business user, so that he can make use of these things to create reports and dashboards. So that is how it works. And then building the presentation layer. So yeah, you will learn about business under BMM layer in this session. You will learn how to create logical tables, columns, sources, and we will also teach you how to create joins among the tables, how to create star schema, snowflake schema, and then we will see how to create calculation columns, build measures. All these topics will be discussed as part of your logical layer, which is nothing but your business model and mapping layer. And then followed by presentation layer, which I have discussed. This is something like a layer wherein you are going to create a subject area. So when you say subject area, this is the actual subject area which the end user will see as part of his web interface. So in his web interface, he'll be seeing the subject area. This subject area you're going to create as part of your RPD in the last layer, which is called as the presentation layer. So that's about the 3 layers. So once you are, so by the end of this particular session, the student will be in a position to create a repository, create a physical layer, design the physical layer, provide the joins, and then he'll be able to create a new business model as per the requirement, and he'll be able to provide joins. He will be able to create a star schema in the logical layer, and finally he'll be able to present. He will be able to create a subject area in the presentation layer, and finally he is good enough to create a repository. And then he has to validate the repository, which we'll be discussing. And once you validate this, this has to be deployed on your WebLogic server. So you have got something called WebLogic server, so which runs on a particular port. So this is a web-based interface using which you access your WebLogic server. We got 2 web-based interfaces as part of we will be discussing as part of our course. One is the Enterprise Manager, where you start and stop your services, and you have got a console. So I'm just opening my Enterprise Manager. So this is a place where once you create a repository, you validate a repository. Once you develop a consistent and valid repository, you need to deploy this repository onto a WebLogic server. So this is what you're going to do as part of your Enterprise Manager. So using Enterprise Manager web-based interface, you're going to deploy your RPD. So RPD is nothing but this is the file which we have created. So you're going to deploy this RPD onto your RPD. So probably if you have an idea about how web server works, like if you are requesting a web page, let's say I'm requesting a Times of India page. If I'm logging this particular site, if I'm logging to the particular site, that means there is a web server in the background, right? It is requesting a particular page. So that's how it works. So similarly, even in OBA also we have got a web server, which is your WebLogic server, which will actually have all your content, all your RPD. RPD is deployed in your WebLogic server, and you have a web catalog which will serve the end user with this particular interface. Because see, the end user is able to create the reports because your RPD is deployed on your WebLogic server. So I'm going to show you how do you do the deployment. If you see, this is your RPD which is being deployed on your Enterprise Manager. So there's a process involved for deploying. We need to follow a process to deploy your RPD. So I was explaining about console also. So these two interfaces are the major two interfaces. As part of your job, you will be doing it. So you'll be using the Enterprise Manager, you'll be using the WebLogic Administration Console. These are the two interfaces which the developer will be using, and he will also use this for creating the reports, and he will use the administration tool to create a repository, the RPD file, and once he creates the RPD file, he will deploy it in the Enterprise Manager. Quite slow, yeah. So if you see here, under the deployment, you will find the process to deploy your RPD. So currently my BA sample RPD is being deployed. If I see, this is my BA sample RPD. So once you create a new repository, you will be going to this interface and deploy your RPD. So as part of our course, you'll be learning this as well. So once you deploy this, yeah, that ends with the basic structure, like how do you create a repository, how do you validate a repository and deploy it on a server. Once you deploy it on a server, you should be able to open your web-based interface and use that subject area for creating the reports. So again, there are a number of other topics, like how do you create your business model using multiple logical table sources, and how do you create calculations, how do you create dimension hierarchies, level-based measures. All these are different concepts which we'll be discussing as part of your repository design and development. And we'll also discuss about variables. Variables, like in any programming language, you have variables to store the values. Similarly, OBA is having a variable concept where you store certain values in your variables. You have got session variables, you have got repository variables. So you store these values in your variables so that you can use these variables as part of your reports. So we'll be discussing about variables, different types of variables, how do you initialize these variables. All these things will be discussed as part of this topic. And then finally we'll discuss about time series measures. How do you create time series reports? You wanted to do comparison reports, like you wanted to compare sales of this year versus sales of last year. So all these comparisons can be done using time series measures. And then we'll discuss about security. When you talk about security, this is one of the most important topics. Whenever you work on any BA project, one of the important topics the end user will be looking at is security. In case, let's assume that you have got here the client has got three departments: finance, and you have got, let's say, supply chain, and you have got HR. So the client has asked the OBA developer to develop 10 reports in each of these modules. 10 reports here, 10 reports here, and 10 reports here. So in each of these modules, they have to develop it. So the users, the business users who are part of your finance department can use these 10 reports. The users from the supply chain should be able to use these 10 supply chain reports, and the users from HR should be able to use these 10 HR reports. And the security comes over here is, there are two aspects. One is authentication, authorization. So we'll be discussing these two topics wherein authentication means a user should be able to access your OBI system. So you first authenticate whether the user is valid user or not. Okay. So you will learn as part of this security, you will learn how to create users, how to create groups, how do you validate a user. That means how do you authenticate a user. Once a user is authenticated, you need to provide authorization. So if a user who belongs to finance department, he is authorized to see only these 10 finance reports. He should not see the 10 reports of supply chain. He should not be able to see the 10 reports of your HR. So that is what security means. So you are trying to secure your finance reports such that only finance users will be able to see these reports. And supply chain users should not see finance reports. HR users should not see other department reports. So that is how you will have to configure your security in such a way that this security can be implemented. So in that case, users who are relevant for their reports can see only their reports. They shouldn't be seeing other people's reports, other department reports. So we'll learn all these topics as part of your security. So as part of this, we'll discuss the Oracle Platform Security Service, how it works, how users are being created, where these are created. Now we have got a LDAP store, default LDAP store, where the users are being stored. When you create a user, that user gets stored in your LDAP stores. So Sandeep, you might be having an idea about all these things, I guess, right? The security realm. Have you worked on WebLogic server? Right.
Yes, I have. Like I know the LDAP integration.
Yeah. So right. So as part of this, like in the WebLogic server, in OBI, like we create all the users over here. So over here, if you see, all these are different users which are being created. So internally, your WebLogic server is going to store all these users in the internal LDAP store. So that's how it works. So we are going to discuss all these aspects.
But mostly, if somebody is working in a big corporation, it would be an external Active Directory,
correct.
Right?
Right. It's an external activity, but most of the times, what will happen is, in a project, generally, if you take, there are three different types of responsibilities. One is OBI admin. One is OBI admin related activities. The other one is OBI report development. One is OBI repository development. So if a developer goes, he might have to do any of these jobs. So either he will be asked to create reports, or either he will be asked to create a repository. Sometimes he will be asked to create both. First he has to create the repository, and using this repository he has to create the reports. And sometimes there are situations where he will be asked to do the installation, all the OBI admin related activities. It includes like installation, configuration, importing the users from the LDAP, importing the users from the LDAP, the external LDAP if there is any. So all these things are part of your admin activities. So,
but why would we import the users from external LDAP? We would just connect to the external LDAP and authenticate them.
Right. So, generally what happens is in your administration tool, you will have to use this because to provide security, you will have to sync all these users. If you see over here, you will have to import all these things to provide security. So if I click this, I'll be getting all the users and the roles. So this is where I'm going to use these users to provide security to my subject areas. To provide security, I need to import these users to my OBI layer.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Okay, so for authentication purpose, all the users will be there in an LDAP itself. We are not doing anything. So the process remains same. People will be authenticating using the external LDAP only. The only reason why we are importing to OBI layer is to provide security. So
authorization.
Authorization. Authentication will be done at the LDAP server, but even at the OBI layer also you need to do that so that you can provide authorizations.